All right, everybody, thank you all for joining us this evening. Let me go ahead and move this down here. Let's see. Oh, sorry, I'm trying to move my little video thing. Okay, thank you all for joining us this evening. We're just gonna discuss the Great Georgia Pollinator Census and how you guys can participate with us. Just to quickly introduce myself, I am Carol Stringer. I am the agriculture agent in the North Fulton building. Melissa Matee, the agriculture agent in the South office, has also agreed to join us tonight and will help me answer any questions that are entomology based. Let's see, any other housekeeping? I don't think so. Okay, so I'm just going to take this time right now to go through some of the basic entomology to help you identify the different pollinators that we look for during the pollinator census. And then after that, I'm going to help show you guys where to take your data and as well as where to find a really good tally sheet that you can use that also has identification tips on it as well. Okay, so just to let you guys know a little bit more about it, the Great Georgia Pollinator Census is a citizen science project through University of Georgia's Center for Urban Agriculture. And we use this as a way to kind of monitor insect populations throughout the state. So anybody can participate in this. It definitely doesn't have to be, you don't have to be an entomologist to be part of it. It could be children, school groups, garden clubs, individuals, really anybody that's looking to learn more about pollinators and the insects that we can find around our home. So in order to be part of the census, you're going to have to first take a few minutes, sometime in the next few days, and go out into your yard and look at what kind of plants that you have growing around your home and see if you have anything that's blooming this time of year, because we really want to find a plant that has a lot of blooms. And so I have a list here of a couple of good ones that you might have at your home or maybe in a community garden, something like that would be good. So you really just want to pick a plant that's actively blooming and that seems to have a lot of insect activity. So once you've found your plant, and I definitely encourage you to do that ahead of time, once you've decided to do that, you're going to go out to your garden plant on either the 21st or the 22nd, which is next Friday and Saturday. And you're going to set up your little lawn chair and have your tally sheet and a timer. So even like a timer that's on your cell phone would be perfect. And you're going to set a timer for 15 minutes. So during that 15 minutes, you are going to count the insects that land on the plant that you have selected. So, and I love this picture here because zinnias are one of my favorite plants and they're a beautiful flower and they're also something that's blooming very actively this time of year. So if you have zinnias, I think they're a great candidate for this because they seem to attract a lot of pollinators. They often make a lot of flowers on each plant. So they're definitely a popular one. But again, like we said, any of these plants that we listed on the side would also be good suggestions. And you may have something completely different that's blooming right now at your house that you see has a lot of insects on it as well. Anything that is just blooming will be perfect. So these are the different categories that we collect data on in the pollinator census. So we have three species that we differentiate specifically. So we have carpenter bees, bumblebees, and honeybees. And then we have the following categories that are a little bit more broad of just small bees, wasps, flies, butterflies, and any other insects that might happen to be on your plant during your 15-minute window. So I'm going to go through each one of these. So to start off, we're going to talk about carpenter bees. So they are the largest type of bee that we're going to count today. So they have a black body that has yellow and black bands. Its real identifying characteristic is this shiny abdomen. We call it the shiny hiney because the abdomen is sort of reflective looking. It has very dense hair on its head and thorax, but it has no hair on the abdomen. And it also has a broad head which has some different sexual dimorphism with the coloration. So you have yellow and white coloring on the face, and the females have all black on the face. So again, the big thing with the carpenter bees is that they have the shiny hiney. So a lot of times people know carpenter bees because they can be kind of destructive around the home. They like to burrow into unsealed or untreated wood. And they build their nest in there. So sometimes people are kind of annoyed by carpenter bees because they can cause a lot of problems. But they're a really great pollinator. As you can see in this picture, it's got a lot of pollen grains on the top of its thorax where it's, been in some flowers. So it really is a good pollinator, and we want to make sure that we take care of it and count it in the census, just because, despite the fact that it has kind of a bad reputation. So the next one we're going to look at is the bumblebee. So the bumblebee is quite ubiquitous. We all know bumblebees, probably from our own yards or being outside in the summer. They really are sort of a disproportionate little body. They're a very fat bee with a tiny head and small wings that appear disproportionate. They have those yellow and black alternating bands on the abdomen, and also they're very hairy. So bumblebees are covered with hair all over, whereas again, if you remember, the carpenter bees do not have that on the abdomen. So here's a good comparison picture. And also just to show you the size difference between the two. So a carpenter bee is much larger than a bumblebee. We've got this nice little analogy here that the carpenter bee is like the Mack truck and a bumblebee is a pickup truck. So really they appear similarly, but the carpenter bees are just much larger in appearance. And again, of course, remember that the bumblebees have the fuzzy rear and the carpenter bees have a shiny hiney. Here we have some bumblebees on some Mexican sunflower or zinnia. And here's a good picture that shows how the pollen granules get onto a bumblebee. So as they fly, their hairs become positively charged from the static of the wings. And then when they land on the flower, they're able to sort of quickly just draw up all the pollen on the granules. And that really helps them transport the pollen to another flower. They'll move the pollen grains off their back into their little, they have these little sort of like buckets on their legs where they carry the pollen grains. This is a good photo that shows how the hairs on an insect, especially a bumblebee, they have these nice burrs on them, which allow the hairs to kind of, the granules to really stick to each hair. It kind of helps them absorb everything in addition to the static. So our next category is going to be honeybees. Most of us are very familiar with honeybees. It's Apis mellifera. They have a brown or black stripes on their body, and they kind of have this golden appearance, halo look to them. They are, again, hairy, but as you can see, they're not quite as disproportionate as the bumblebees. So honeybees are kind of interesting in the fact that they are a domesticated insect. So humans are kind of their caretakers, and they don't really exist in the wild too often. You will see occasionally a wild colony, but traditionally they are raised in hives by beekeepers, and they are not native to the United States. They were brought over from Europe about 400 years ago. They have a lot of economic importance. They pollinate most of our agricultural crops, as well as the flowers in our gardens and other native plants as well. So they're quite a beneficial little insect, although they are very susceptible to pesticides and to diseases as well. So if you guys remember back just a few slides, I had a picture of the carpenter bee with the bumblebee. So now we have the bumblebee and the honeybee. So the carpenter bee is the largest of the three, the bumblebee is in the middle, and then the honeybee is the smallest of the distinguished bees. So as you can see there, it still has a very distinct appearance, especially when compared to the bumblebee. It's much smaller, much more proportionate. They're very distinguishable. So our next category is going to be small bees. Most of these will be native to the United States. They have specialty roles in the environment, although some of them, of course, are generalist pollinators as well. Some good examples will be leafcutter bees, sweat bees, mason bees, and others as well. And we've got a tip on here to look out for that metallic sheen from the sweat bees. They can be quite small, but that shininess makes them very visible to the eye. But all these little bees have a great, they're just as important and just as impactful as the others as well. So they're one that we really want to make sure we look for. Here's a good example of a couple different ones that would fall under that small bee category. As we can see, they're not honeybees or Bumble or Carpenter bees. So any bees that we see are going to fall into this broad other bee category. So next we have wasps, which I think all of us are going to be familiar with. We've all probably battled them around our homes. I personally don't love them, of course, but they are important beneficial insects. They do a lot of things, and they are pollinators as well. So a couple good examples here. We have the potter wasp, which makes kind of like a mud daub home. And then we have the paper wasp, this brownish wasp that will build those large nests. So wasps, their identifying characteristics is that some of them have a very pinched waist, as you can see up here with the potter wasp. And they're very sleek. They don't have any hair on their bodies like the bees do. So it's a good way to differentiate them. And then we also have she mentions yellow jackets as well in this presentation, but they're not often seen on flowers. They're not really a pollinator too often. So now we have flies. So that's something you might see on your flower next week. So just a quick rundown of the differences between bees and flies. So bees are going to have 4 wings compared to flies, which just have the 2. Bees have very prominent antennae compared to a fly, which has much smaller diminutive antenna. Bees have they have 3 small eyes in the middle and 2 larger eyes on the side, compared to flies have 2 gigantic eyes, which are really just very dominant on their heads. Flies don't really carry pollen. And they're not very hairy either. If you remember back, the bees have a lot of hair on their bodies. Bees also carry pollen in those pollen baskets on their legs. You're going to see another picture of those. And then finally, the other differentiating sort of characteristic between the two is that flies will spread their wings when they land. So bees kind of tuck them back on their body. So here's one that's fun. It appears at first glance like it might be a small bee because it has those yellow and black stripes on its abdomen. But if we look closer, we see it only has 2 wings, has very large eyes, very diminutive antennae, and the wings are spread. They're not tucked back on the abdomen. So this is not actually a bee, it is a fly. So it's a bee mimic, which is kind of fun. And here's another one. This one is also a bee mimic, but again, you notice it has those super small antennae, very large eyes, the spread wings, no pollen gathering sacs. So at first glance, definitely would appear bee or almost wasp-like. So here we have a different insect. Again, one we've looked at a little bit more closely, but this is a bumblebee. You can see the alternating color patterns on the abdomen, lots of hair on the thorax. And then we have these cool little, almost like little bucket structures on their legs where they store the pollen granules as they're flying around. So we can definitely see that this is not a fly. And here's another great little picture. I'm sure most of us would identify this as a housefly. As we can see here, even though it does kind of have hairs on its body, it holds the wings back. It's got very large eyes, no prominent antennae or pollen sacs. Okay, butterflies and moths. So this is a category that we are probably all very familiar with and love. So butterflies and moths, of course, are probably the most famous of the pollinators next to bees. So probably you're going to be doing this during the day, but moths are also very influential pollinators, especially for night blooming plants, which are not necessarily common, but do happen. So they might be in a symbiotic relationship with a specific moth sometimes. But, and just to quickly go over, we have a few species here that you might see that are common. So a monarch is one we all are probably familiar with. A Gulf fritillary is a similar looking insect. And then a gray hair streaker mentioned here. And like I said, moths are also very important pollinators. And they can be beneficial to those plant species that bloom during the nighttime. So if you've been looking at your plant for 15 minutes and you've been counting all these different insects that are landing on the flower, and suddenly you see a couple of things that are maybe not even on the flower part of the plant, but you're just like, there's some more insects, we want to make sure we also carry the count those. And we're going to put them in the other insect category. So a few things that you might see might be a praying mantis, a ladybug, ambush bug, a katydid is a thought that I had a minute ago, wheel bug, it's kind of a more unusual one. And most of these are predatory insects. So you might see all kinds of different things on your flower the day that you are doing your count. So I would advise you, you're using your phone for a timer, but you can also use it as a magnifier and to take pictures of any things that you're not sure what they are to help you identify. So that can be a good tool as well. Okay, so now I'm going to quiz you all. I'm going to pull up if I can get the chat to pull up here. Okay, so what category would you all put this in? If you guys want to put it in the group chat, just take a minute to make sure we're all on the same page. Yes, so this one is actually a honeybee. It's not a bumblebee because we can see that it's more of this amber color. It's hard to tell in this picture the size of the insect, but in real life, a honeybee is quite small compared to a bumblebee. Okay, next one. What category will we put this one in? Yes, so this is a carpenter bee. As you can tell, it's quite a big bee, even for the flower that it's sitting on. And it has that shiny abdomen, which is kind of its identifying characteristic. Yes, the shiny hiney. How about this one? Yes, this one is the bumblebee. And it's kind of an odd angled photo, but we can tell that it's a bumblebee because it has these alternating patterns of black and yellow on the abdomen. It's got the wings folded back over its body, and it's covered in hair as well. Okay, what about this guy? Yes, so this one is a wasp, and you can tell that again because it's totally smooth. It has the tiny pinched waist, and it doesn't look anything like the other bees. So really what the identification portion of this is really focused on the bumble, honey, and the carpenter bee, and trying to figure out the best way to differentiate between those, because those are the ones we want to really identify. Okay, so now I'm gonna stop the screen share for just 1 second. Let's see here. Okay, give me just one moment here. See if I can. Okay, so now you guys what you can do is you can go to ggapc.org. That's the website for the pollinator. Pull the chat back up here for us. Where's the chat? Hold on just one second, I'm sorry. Okay, there we go. Okay, so there's the website. I just put it in the, let's see here, to everyone. There's the website to the pollinator census. So if you guys will take some time and get onto the website, here we can scroll down and you guys can see here, there's some more instructions on here, but if you scroll right down here, there's this section right here where it goes over the tally sheet and it just says click here to download. That's all you're gonna do is do that. And it should bring up this PDF where you guys can see it's got a little box for everything that you count. And it's got a nice description with a little photo to help you identify the data when you're out there trying to differentiate. So you don't have to remember everything I told you. You can just use the sheet to help you look over some of the differences between the different bees and things like that. This is a really great resource. So I definitely encourage you to print this out and use this to make your official tally. So once you have, you've taken your count and you're done, you've done your 15 minutes, you're gonna go back to the website. And so we can't see it today, but when you come onto the website on August 21st, there will be a portal right here where it says to upload your data. And you will click on that and it'll take you right through it quickly. So that is it. It's very straightforward. The big things are really just to get the tally sheet because that's going to help you identify the insects when you're outside in the field. So I'm going to actually exit the screen sharing and I can let's see, I'll put this in the chat box too. Okay. So now I'm going to go through a couple of the questions. Let's see. Okay. Okay. So I have a couple of questions here. I've got a question about a multi-stem plant. Do you only count the insects on the blossoms, or do we count what we see on all the stems? So I would say if it's one plant with multiple stems and multiple flowers, I would count everything on the whole plant. And Melissa, you can chime in if I'm wrong. So in terms of an area, I would do one plant. So if you're looking like a shrub, I would maybe choose like one branch of the shrub. Any guidance on that, Melissa? Oh, I'm so sorry. Sorry about that. I'm so sorry. I was asking you for questions. I had you muted. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, you can stick to a single area if you start to get overwhelmed, because some of the bigger plants, you're going to have a lot to count. So yeah, if you stick to like 10% of the plant, that would be perfectly fine. Just make a note.
To choose a plant, I would, like I said, I would go out in your yard, look for something that has a lot of flowers on it. Right now, because sometimes plants bloom in the spring and then they don't have as many later in the year. So just look for something that has a lot of flowers and seems like it has a lot of insect activity buzzing around as well.
And then can you do this more than once or more than one location? I believe you can't do it more than once on the same plant. We would want you to move around. Let's see.
So the info is all kind of aggregated from across the state, and then it's published in a study. So we take the data and we actively pull scientific graphs and things out of it as well to kind of give it. I mean, basically, this is a project that helps University of Georgia monitor pollinator populations across the state to see where are they declining, where are they doing okay, what kind of insects are showing up in urban areas. So we look at a lot of different things like that. And I think, as whoever mentioned, let's see, to a perennial plant, I think that it could be perennial or annual. It's whatever you think is best. What do you think, Melissa? Insects that land multiple times. Oh, you're muted still.
I don't know why it won't let me unmute. Okay, sorry.
There you go. Sorry about that. I have no idea what was going on.
It's fine.
I just made you a co-host.
Yeah. So let's see. I got thrown off by that. Yeah. I mean, perennial or annual, it doesn't matter. Like zinnias are such great pollinator plants, but they're annuals. But then you have things like coneflower and rudbeckia that are perennials. So it's really just important to pick a plant and look at that plant and just record it for that 15 minutes. As long as it's active. Mountain mint is great too. That's a really, really great plant. So,
I think that it has like multiple flowers. You could look at the entire plant. So if it has 3 or 4 different flowers, I would just try to count them all.
Do you count the pollinator again if it leaves and comes back? No. If you're able to keep track of it, don't count it again. But I mean, if you have a ton of little bees, then that may be hard. But most of the time, you're not going to get a single bee visiting the same exact flower multiple times. So they do have a very, very good memory.
Okay.
It's ggapc.org. Yeah, she has the links further up in the chat.
Okay. I can put them back in again.
We do not count hummingbirds. Hummingbirds are incidental pollinators in our ecosystem. So they're beneficial, but we are not actually counting hummingbirds. I can't remember. I had to step away for a second. I don't necessarily think we have an other. I think it's all arthropods.
Yeah. There's nothing in there for any kind of bird or anything of that nature.
Yeah. But I mean, keep note of hummingbirds because they're good to have. So
let's see. And you guys, if you all would, I'm gonna give you this as well.
Are you putting the survey in there? Or?
Yes, I am. So if you guys have a minute to fill out the survey, we would really appreciate that. So we have a record of you attending today, and we have your email if you would like to come to more events or learn more about anything from the Extension office. It should really only take you about 1 to 2 minutes to fill out. It's very quick.
You can water the flowers the day before. I wouldn't really deviate from your normal watering. You know, you want to make sure there is nectar in there and they need water to make nectar. So, I have a private question. Can you count the same plant on different days? I believe you can if it's on different days and at very different times. That may be a question for Becky. You can't count like the same plant at the same spot, 15 minutes after you finished, but you may be able to the next day because we're only doing this for 2 days. So
I would still try to find a different plant.
Yeah.
If it's in your yard. Yeah.
I would, because most of the time you're going to have more than one plant anyway. It would be better to find a different plant.
Any other questions from anybody out there? Okay, please take a moment to fill out our survey. We really appreciate your participation and for you guys to come in today and watch our PowerPoint. I know it's kind of brief this evening, but we really appreciate your participation in the Pollinator Census. This is a very important citizen science project. It's definitely important stuff. So if you guys have any more questions, we're here. You can email us or reach out to us. I'll type my email here in the chat box.
It looks like we're recording. Yeah.
So the recording, I'll actually put it on our YouTube channel, and you guys can come back to it as well. I can put it'll take me probably an hour or two to make the recording. So I'll just pull up the YouTube link really quick. Okay. So this should be the link to our YouTube channel, I think. Let's see. I'm logged in, so I hope it appears. But yes, you guys can go there. We have other videos on different topics. We have family consumer science topics on there as well. So feel free to browse. And later today or tomorrow, I'll put the video up for you all. So thank you for coming today. Bye, everyone.